Stuff there.
Well, that happens when I flip the switch like I just did.
Oh, yeah.
See, boom, there we go. I flipped the switch and now all the things appeared and we are live. And I want to say hello.
How do you do?
How are you today, this fine evening?
Oh,
Thanks for being here, hanging out with us tonight. We've got some pretty cool stuff ahead for the evening, including a giveaway. We're going to cover air-driven filtration systems, and believe it or not, there's a whole bunch of stuff we can talk about there when it comes to the air. You like that? I'm already rhyming. So I've got some show and tell. I've got some cool video to show you, and we're going to be talking about all kinds of awesome stuff today, because it actually kind of goes along with the poll that I did yesterday, which a lot of people answered. And I was very proud of the answers that I saw, even in the comments sections of that poll, because to keep things simple, when I ask those things, like, which one would you pick? And I'm just like, okay, well, which one? If you had to pick one. But the comments were very, very, very good.
Knowledgeable.
And I will talk about why that is in a minute. But I would expect nothing less from the people who watch Primetime Aquatics, where they're just on their filtration game. So that was pretty awesome. Thank you so much for being here. We are, like I said, we're going to have a giveaway a little bit later, and we have got some things going on, so all kinds of stuff happening. And before we get too far into it, you wanted to show something off, right? So why don't you go ahead and do that right now, because Joanna couldn't wait to do this. And so we got these awesome, want me to hold one? So we got these awesome coasters from Oink. Sorry, wrong person. From Oink. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Crystal.
These are really crazy. They're like half stone and half wood. They have our name on there, Primetime Aquatics, for the gallery. So these were really special. These are really special. So thank you very, very much.
Sweet little
for
note.
Sending us these awesome things in the note. They are, trust me, I promise you, they will be well used, because
they will.
Currently, when it comes to our dining room table especially, we basically use paper towels, and like, okay, let's not get any of the ring around the table, because our table is actually prone to that. So this is...
In the gallery, we will have no rings on our furniture.
No, we will not. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
And so that was pretty awesome when you brought those home today.
I ran to the post office.
She did. I'm like, you got to go to the post office and to the P.O. box, and those were there. Well, and when we got the box, I'm like, what is so heavy? What I really, I had no idea what this could be. I didn't want to shake it. I'm glad I didn't, because it'd be like, don't shake the box. So anyway, thank you for that. Really, really, really appreciate it. That was awesome to see. And before I forget, let's see here. Do we still have it? Oh, barely. We have a brand new prime timer. Snaffa Mary, thank you so much. I hope I said that right. I just said it kind of fast, like I knew what I was saying. But thank you so much for being a new prime timer, Primate prime time partner. Really appreciate it. That's pretty awesome.
And I just see that Oink says that she just got 7 candy cane tetras in an auction.
Yeah.
You're going to love them. I just loved my little group of
Unless,
candy
of course, they fin nip everything else in the tank. No, I'm just kidding. They generally don't do that. So
unless they eat all your other fish.
Yeah, they might eat all your cichlids. And they eat gravel. Did you know that? Now, that would be something.
Can you imagine? They eat all my gravel.
The gravel-eating fish. No, they're awesome fish. So anyway, let's get into the things. I always like to mention things, like, for instance, the videos that have happened over the last week. This past Sunday, I posted a video on a 75-gallon aquarium that I did called the Nubius Forest. So if you haven't seen that video, it's pretty cool. I basically did the entire scape, minus I think you glued some Anubias in for me, but I had to do all the plants too. So I have at a point now where I'm now pretty much doing my own stuff, and I've got some tanks to work on in the fish room, because believe it or not, the last couple of videos for the gallery aren't out yet, because we've made some updates to one of the 125s. The last 75-gallon right now in real life is done. That video will be out in the next couple of weeks. And at this point, the tanks for the gallery are finished, and we are moving on to step 2 of the gallery. And that is, if you've seen any of the builds that we've done on that side, the walls are all completely done, which is nice.
Yes.
The curtain is up. We've got the area rugs or whatever, the carpets on the floor to kind of cut down on the echo, and that has helped tremendously. And so now the last part is just the artistic flow of the room and making sure that the walls and stuff are done. You've been working on that for the last couple of days. I gave you an idea of here's what I'm thinking, and that won't take a long time. Once we have the things, which hopefully the last thing I have to do, and I really should have done this today and I ran out of time, but probably either tomorrow or Friday, I am going to make a call to the cable company to come and get all of the stuff that I need hardwired down into the gallery so I can move all this down there. But we are very close. Depending on when that happens and when we get the stuff up on the walls, I'm hoping in the next couple weeks we will finally make the move down into the gallery from here. This clears up this area. That is a whole nother set of videos on the small scape where you've got some pretty fantastic ideas.
I sure do. And I just today have acquired my centerpiece piece of furniture for up here.
It is true. And
pick it up.
If I could show you this, I can't because I don't want to move the camera all around. There is tape outlines all over our floor up here now of places where furniture is going to go. And it's crazy. Yeah, this whole area is going to be a very, very different feel. And I'm looking forward to it because we've had this thing going on now for a while and I like it very much. And I just realized our camera is not even. It's going to bug me the rest of the light. Or maybe it is, and this thing is just over a little bit.
Kinda.
No, it's not even. Oh, well.
Oh, well.
But anyways, we'll have to just deal with it.
We do have some fun places represented today. We've got Todd with from Memphis and
nice.
Zip it. And Rob, Central Illinois.
Very
Illinois,
cool.
Whoop, whoop. And I think I even saw a Georgia. Yeah, Jennifer from Georgia.
Nice. Very cool.
Oh.
So other things, other videos we've had coming out in the week today on the small scape, what did you do?
Well, I was talking about, there are certain fish like cichlids and Oscars that y'all are just like, they're like water puppies. They're just the best. Well, you know what? There's some tiny fish that are equally as awesome to be your very best friends. They're very, very personable. So that was today's video.
So personable tiny fish. I love it. So that was the video on the small scape. Tomorrow we'll have the members video. And then Sunday's video is going to be a product review I've been dying to do for a while now. So I'm looking forward to that. I hope you are too. So that's going to be on Sunday. Places we are going to be. Let's see. We have, again, the double whammy coming up on the 25th of February. That is Sunday. You're going to be at the GCCA, Greater Chicago Cichlid Association swap in Northbrook, Illinois. Mm-hmm. I am going to be at the Quad City swap in Davenport, Iowa. So we're doing double duty there. And then I believe it's Saturday the 9th of March is the Greenwater swap. So those are the things we have coming up. And it's not too far off where we're going to be mentioning Aquashella that third week of May, believe it or not, in Dallas. That is coming up. And by the way,
crazy.
If you're thinking about attending Aquashella in Dallas, now would probably be a good time. I'm somewhat certain, I think. Maybe check the website and see if the tickets and stuff have gone on sale because that is going to be a great time. I am really looking forward to it. It always is. The venue is very nice. The hotel that's connected to the venue is very, very nice as well. So that is the third week of May, somewhere in that 17th, 18th of May-ish area. I don't remember the exact dates, but that's what's going on there. So that is a pretty cool thing. What else is going on? What's going on in the land of comments sections? Did you see anything awesome?
Yeah, lots of other states and locations.
I see Iowa, I see Texas, I see Pennsylvania. Yeah. All very, very cool
Isn't
stuff.
that fun?
Glad you're hanging out. Joliet. Yeah, Joliet.
Ooh.
Yeah, we go and sometimes we're in Joliet to see the Slammers. The Joliet Slammers is a baseball team, and they are a minor league team, and they play our Schaumburg Boomers sometimes. So we go there and root for the away team, and we sit in the away section. But
we do.
Pretty cool place if you've never been there.
Yeah.
So absolutely. Today's topic, like I said, we do have a topic. I think it's an important one, and I think it's even more important after having, like I said, read through the comments of the poll that I did yesterday. And the poll was, if you had to pick one type of filter, which one would you pick? And the options I gave, I believe from what I can remember, hang-back, canister, air-driven, and maybe sump. I think.
I think
is
you did.
that what I did?
I think so.
And air-driven included some people are like, where's the sponge filter? I'm like, well, that's the air-driven type stuff. So we're going to address that because can you bring up the poll real fast? Because last time I checked, it was fairly evenly split in between the different types, at least the top couple of them, I think we're pretty close. Let me see here what we got. Thanks. I'm going to go ahead and steal your electronic device here. So what we had, my gosh,
I was surprised.
5,600 votes, and it was for the big, what I call the big three, pretty evenly split. So we had 29% for hang on back, so basically a third hang on back, a third canister at 31%, air driven, which includes everything we're going to talk about tonight, like your sponge filters, 30 or 29%, 8% said sump, and 3% said something else. And so I don't know if I expected to see, I guess I probably did, about a third-ish of each for the big three at least. But I loved the comments. And what I liked about them so much was the question was, what size tank? What kind of fish are you keeping? And, in it, what kind of substrate do you have? And are you breeding?
Yeah.
So it's like, oh yeah, I love it. I love that type of response when people know filters have both. They have advantages and disadvantages, something we've talked about on this channel. And by the way, I've got a ton of videos linked. So for the things that we're going to be talking about tonight with the air-driven filtration systems, there are videos linked in the description. Check them out after watching the live stream if you want a deeper dive into some of the filtration mechanisms that we talk about today, especially comparisons, because for all filters, there are advantages and disadvantages of each, and it really does depend. And I want to say that from the start. It really depends on your goals. If you look around our fish rooms, so just generally speaking, and then we're going to get into the air-driven systems in a second here. If you look at everywhere around our fish room, we have different types of filtration. So we have the air-driven system. That's the primary one in the fish room. So a big central pump that's running mostly sponge filters. So we have a lot of that. And, we've run Matten filters. We've run Undergravel filters. Back in the day, I ran box filters, which we'll talk about a little bit later. We have hang-on-back filters, and we use a lot of those for additional mechanical filtration. But then you look at the gallery, and before the gallery, I wasn't really a huge fan of canister filters. But when you really start analyzing the use case for filtration in the gallery, it's got to be super quiet. These are aquascaped aquariums. I don't want to see the filtration. Some of these tanks are going to be fairly heavily stocked, so we need to have a decent amount of mechanical and biological filtration. And the canisters were just like, yeah, it is the way we must go in the gallery. So you look at these tanks right behind us, and these are all-in-one tanks where you have basically a system where you have compartmentalization in the back of the aquarium. So there is a place for just about every type of filter. In fact, I just did a YouTube short maybe a couple weeks ago where I showed the sea chase shark in an aquarium that just had a ton of stuff floating around. We pulled out some rocks, and I put a bunch of red tail botia in there. They stirred up all kinds of stuff, and I put that internal canister filter in that tank, and within maybe 12 hours, it was almost crystal clear. And it's still in there because they do stir up a lot of stuff. It's a pretty heavily stocked tank, but all I have to do is take that thing out, rinse it out every few days, and it keeps the tank looking absolutely awesome. So there are lots of things. And then, of course, there are people who said, well, I go filterless, which basically means I don't have an actual filter. There's nothing driving, there's no mechanism driving water through media. And they're relying on plants and lightly stocked aquariums and letting the surface area and the other inhabitants, the microbes and the plants, take care of their water parameters. So lots and lots of different things you can do in the land of filtration. So what do we got? Anything else you want to mention before we get into this show and tell / air-driven system conversation?
No, Oink does not foresee going to any of the aquashellas this year.
Well, that's not cool. Well,
Are you going to the OCA?
Not the, no, it would be the Keystone.
No.
Well, Keystone's nearby. The OCA is not.
Yeah, I know, but I thought last year you went to the OCA,
oh, maybe,
so I was just wondering if
my bad.
you were going to the OCA or Keystone. Just curious.
Yep. Leslie says, my dream is to have a filter that has no cons. Will that ever happen? No. No. Unfortunately, no, it will.
Keep hoping.
It will never happen because, like I said, all filters have their advantages and disadvantages, unfortunately. So, yeah, there's always going to be an element of disappointment, I suppose, to a filter. But there are ways to optimize your filtration to minimize the list of cons, if you will, when it comes to filters. So, okay, let's focus now on the what?
Just wanted to share. Zach has gotten the Scarlet Baddest today.
Oh, that's cool. That's a great
So
fish.
exciting. Such a cool little fish. Just a shrunken, little tiny, miniaturized big fish.
Yeah.
That's what I think.
So here's a fun story before I get into the air-driven systems. We've got a bunch of green cubitai rasbora in the fish room. They're looking so good for the swaths. We've got like 300 of them in there. I fully plan. I'm hoping they'll be available for green water, but I'm pretty sure they're all going to be wiped out for Quad Cities and GCCA because people have been asking for these fish for a while. And I mean, they came in just popping, full size, full of color. But anyway, I'm looking at that tank, and it's not uncommon when you import fish to get a couple of fish that are like, this isn't what I ordered. There's 2 of them.
Oh, boy.
At first, I thought they were scarlet batis because they were pretty small and they were kind of like they had their fins all. But I really looked, and yes, I got, again, my eyes aren't the best sometimes when I'm looking at small fish up close. They were cautopunks. There's like 2 or 3 baby cautopunctatus, the little Lake Tanganyika fish, in with the green cubitai. And they're all like trying to be Mr. Big Man because they're still smaller than all the green cubitai because they're babies, but they're like, yeah, we're going to rule this tank, bro. So they're in there. I'm going to catch them out and I'll throw them in the Lake Tanganyika in 75 when they get a little bit larger because right now they get eaten. But anyway, okay, now it's time. It's time for the air-driven systems. Okay, so when I say air-driven systems, we're talking about any filtration that requires or utilizes air to move water through media. Okay, so there's a number of different types. We'll actually go through some of the different types here in a minute. But generally speaking, if you're using air-driven systems, there's a couple reasons why. One, they're really efficient, and they become more efficient the more aquariums you have. And so when you look at our fish room, we've got a lot of tanks. Even still right now, we've still got 45, 46, somewhere in there. I can't run canisters or hang on backs in every single one of those tanks. I don't have the power to do that. I would blow the fuse instantly if I even added another probably 10 hang on backs. So when it comes to being efficient with energy, the air-driven systems allow you to filter a lot of tanks, potentially utilizing one pump. And even if you don't have a lot of tanks, it can still be efficient if you buy a larger air pump and maybe you want to run 4, 6, 10 tanks on a single fish tank rack. So even if the tanks are smaller. So there's a big advantage when it comes to the efficiency side of things, which means you're also lowering the cost of filtration as opposed to running individual hang-on backs or individual canister filters, even if they're smaller. The other thing is they tend to be fry and shrimp safe. So most of your air-driven systems, they're not sucking through extreme amounts of water, which means the water flow is going to be easy to handle even for your longer fin fish. Like I said, fry, you don't have to worry about fry being like, oh my gosh, my fry are all stuck in my sponge filter. That would be horrible. Shrimp, again, the nice thing about it for the shrimp is they like to graze on the surfaces of your air-driven systems, you know, your sponge filters and Matten filters and things like that. So that's pretty nice. The other thing too is, generally speaking, your only mechanical parts are going to be in the air pump. Now, I will say that there is a common misconception that because you have an air-driven system and it doesn't have a motor with an impeller, that somehow you are less likely to have mechanical issues with your filtration system. That's not necessarily true depending on the air pump that you buy to run all those air-driven filtration media. So if you buy a cheaper pump, that pump can go out just as easily as a hang-on back filter motor or a canister filter motor. So just keep in mind, especially if you're going to be using a pump to run multiple tanks and you're starting to accumulate some really nice fish, it might be worth the extra money to buy a quality pump. For us, we're not sponsored by this company in any way, shape, or any way at all. But we buy the Gemco pumps that basically power our entire fish room. And these things, we've had 3 different sizes, and all of them have run way more than they're supposed to in terms of the number of outlets and all that stuff. And they have just run nonstop. And so there's a little bit of a peace of mind knowing that I have a pump that's going to run hopefully for decades and have very few problems, if any. So the air-driven systems, they do have a lot of benefits, right? Now, there are some downsides. What are the and I think you can speak to the downsides of our air-driven systems and what you've had to deal with. What's your main thing?
First of all, you get your scape all either planned and or executed, and then you're like, oh, I gotta put the sponge filter in. Where am I gonna put it? And then it just totally ruins your scape or just ruins the look. It makes you really angry.
I used to discount that when she would say that, like, just put the sponge filter in, there's no big deal. Until I did the tank that I just did on Sunday. And if you notice, when I showed you that aquarium, there's no sponge filters in there because I didn't want to ruin the look. And I even said in the video, I'm going to put the sponge filters back in. And as of right now, they are in the tank. But as I was setting it up, I was like, oh, I had to move some of the rocks. I had to move some of the wood. I'm like, I got sponge filters going in the corner here.
The worst.
And they're in there now. And actually, in that particular scape, because of where the plants are and how tall they are, they're not super noticeable. But for sure, having sponge filters or box filters or even sometimes a Matten filter or uplift tubes for an Undergravel filter, it's taking up space in the aquarium, for one. And two, I don't think there's too many people out there that say, this actually added to the looks of my aquarium. I'm not saying that there aren't people out there like, I don't mind them. For me personally, I actually don't mind them. I'm so used to seeing them. I barely even notice them. If I look at an aquarium, if it was nicely escaped and there were sponge filters in there, I don't even know if it would register with me like, oh, that sponge filter just ruined the look of that aquarium. I don't necessarily see it, but I know there are a lot of you who are like, yeah, I'm not putting those things in my aquarium because I don't like the way they look, right? The other thing is you're getting very little potential chemical filtration from a filter that is going to be air driven relative to other types of filters. And what I mean by chemical filtration is the ability to use things like Purigen or activated carbon. Are there ways to do it, as we're going to go through some of the filtration methods? Yes, there are. Is it nearly as easy as, let's say, putting it in a filter bag in a canister filter or a hang-on back filter? No, it's not as easy. Now, for us, I don't use chemical filtration, so I don't have carbon. That's not necessarily true. In these canister filters that we just got, I think I left some of the carbon that came with it just in there because I'm like, why not? Who cares? But for the most part, I would never, when it eventually goes bad, I'm not going to replace it because I just generally don't use that type of media. So I haven't found it really to be necessary. That's just something to think about, right? The other potential issue is on the mechanical filtration side relative to other types of filters. The air-driven filters are they are the least capable filtration systems when it comes to mechanical filtration, the ability to pull stuff out of the water to have clear water, clear looking water. That's not to say they can't do it. I mean, again, if you look at all of our aquariums in the fish room throughout the entire almost 7 years that we've been on YouTube, they, for the most part, look pretty good. I mean, when you look at the fish room tours and all that stuff, and a lot of that just goes to properly maintaining, the big thing really is properly maintaining the air-driven filtration media so that they're still capable of pulling stuff out of the water and having the proper flow to get that stuff sucked up. But if you do that, they can still definitely do a good job. But in terms of like, compared to other filters, it's going to be a little bit more work to allow them to do the mechanical filtration. Any other things you can think of before we get into the specific types?
No, except that you've got some.
We got some people.
Couple of.
William, thank you so much for the super chat. Really appreciate it. That's pretty awesome. And what else do we have going on here?
We've got.
Did I go too far?
I don't know.
Hold on, let me just go over here. Oh, hold on a second. Mr. Andy's been a member for the last 17 months. That is really hard to see. That's why the one thing I don't like about
can't see it over
this.
there.
Like here, it says it in words, but it's highlighted on this electronic device. But anyway, thank you so much for the last 17 months. Air stones inside of sponge filters, quiet them down, hide them behind plants and rocks. They certainly do that, Andy. And you know what's the weird thing is I used to do that. I used to have the easy flow air stones in all my sponge filters. But then what would happen is you take a little piece of air tubing, right? And you have to connect the air stone to the air tubing that connects it to the underside of the uplift tube, like that little eyelet. Well, what would happen over time is that little piece of air line would start to rot. It would start to get brittle, right? Hard and brittle like airline does. And then the air stones would fall out. And so I got so sick of them falling out. I'm like, I just got rid of them all. So I stopped putting the air stones in there. But you're absolutely right. They can definitely quiet them down. You can control the flow, smaller bubbles for sure. But for me, I got so sick of replacing that little piece of airline. I'm like, they're all coming out. Brandon, thank you so much for being a member the last 3 months. Says at Primetime Aquatics, thanks for all the great content. No, thank you for hanging out with us and being here. Really appreciate it. So, okay, the different types of filtration. Let's go with thing number one. I'm going to kind of go in order of the way that I was throughout the years, the way I filtered tanks from the time I was like 6 years old back in the 1970s until now. And I would say the first one that I really used as a ute, and this was very, very common back in the day, and that is the box filter. And so you're seeing a picture here of a box filter, and there's different types. This was similar to the one, I remember ours were like, they had like a green lid, and they were a little bit different because I think there was a plastic piece that kind of rested in the center, like in the middle. And then what you would do is you would have this activated carbon on the bottom, and then you would fill the thing up with filter floss at the top. So it's basically similar to a sponge filter in the sense that, again, it's an air-driven filtration method. You got bubbles coming out of the top, and you got the water coming through the top cover there, and then it gets sucked up through the water goes through the filtration, then into the carbon, then it goes up the uplift tube. And they were relatively easy. I remember as a kid, you just pop the top off, you'd pull the filter floss out when it got all gunky and ugly, and you'd put new filter floss in, close it up, and you were ready to go. It took just a minute to kind of maintain those things. They're still available. I pulled this picture right off of, I think it might have been Amazon or something like that. I don't remember who the retailer was, but they're still available. You can find them all over the internet. I think the reason why they're not as common now is because sponge filters have become more important, and we'll talk about sponge filters more in a minute. But if there was a disadvantage to the box filter is, I think of all the air-driven filtration methods we're going to use, you think sponge filters are bad. These things are a lot more visible, right?
Well, they are rather large.
Well, they don't have to be. They can be pretty small, but the problem is you've got, like I said, normally you've got activated carbon there, but then you see all the white filter floss, right? So that's really going to stand out as opposed to like a brown or a gray sponge filter or a black sponge filter. So now you've got this box filter, which, by the way, sometimes it's like green or blue. Now you're putting white filter floss in there. But wait, it gets worse for those of you who've had box filters. The problem is when it gets dirty. So now you've got something that visibly appears dirty in your aquarium. If there's one thing about the sponge filters, if you're maintaining them on a weekly or bi-weekly basis, again, they're grayish, brownish, or black. They don't necessarily appear filthy.
True.
Box filters are like if you had a nasty, dirty, grimy, grubby brown t-shirt that's supposed to be white and you threw it in a box filter. Now you're looking at that thing in your aquarium after a few days.
Good point.
Yeah.
Why aren't they like a smoky kind of color?
Well, you know what? I think, there's two reasons. One, first of all, I think they do make them that way. But the problem is you have to be able to see that your media is dirty so you can change it, right? So otherwise you're just checking it every week or 2 weeks, just kind of popping open the top and looking in.
Yeah, but what would you do with a canister filter? That's what you do, right?
Yes, but a canister filter is a whole different situation because usually even in a heavily stocked tank, you've got at least 4 to 6 weeks before you even have to look at the canister filter, right? So it's and you're not seeing it, right? The canister filter is in your tank under your stand. All you're seeing is an intake and a return.
Word.
Right?
That's why I picked.
Nick. All right, hold on. What movie is that? Word, Nick. Word, Dad. So anyway.
And you just told me where that was from too. I've already forgotten.
You're not allowed to
I never do. I never blab, but I forget. I just forgot already.
Well, that's just one of the things. Again, nice thing about the box filter compared to these other types is you can add some of the chemical filtrations. Like I said, we used to put activated carbon in the bottom of ours or the Purigen, in the more recent times, you could certainly do that. So yeah, that was old school right there, which is pretty cool. I want to say a couple things. Thank you, Christy, for being a member the last 8 months. Thank you for 6 months of fantastic content. We've learned a lot from you both. Well, thank you so much for being here, hanging out with us. Really appreciate it. And then Charlotte's been a member for almost 2 years.
Wow.
You're going on. Hold on. Sorry, didn't mean to do that in your
You have
face if I did.
You have a great last name, Charlotte.
Yeah, you do. But thank you so much for being a member the last 22 months. We use canisters for our show tanks, and the fish room is all air driven. Yeah, so you're basically doing the same thing I've done. Thank you for 22 months of amazing content. We have learned so much from both of you. Well, thank you. Yeah, that's a great way to do it. That's basically the same thing we've done. And then Lynn, she's old school. I think there's Lynn and a few others that can actually say they've hit the big 4-0.
40
Thank you
months.
so much. Primetime Aquatics have been absolutely invaluable in helping me modernize my fish keeping. Been keeping fish since the 1960s. Is that what that says?
That's awesome.
That is pretty stinking awesome.
Rock on with you and your little black Molly.
So here's
Or
a
is
funny
it
story.
Or is it Guppy? I forget.
No.
Guppy.
I think Lynn said it's a Molly.
Molly. Okay.
So we were, what did you get? The diamond head neon
Yeah.
tetras? And I looked in the bag and I was like, what the heck is that? But it was already in the bag. I'm like, well, it's going to be a bonus
no,
fish.
let's give it to her.
I'm like, she'll know what to do with it. So you got a little baby, you got all the, hopefully,
Little good luck charm.
I count them. You got all the diamond head neon tetras plus a little baby Molly or guppy or whatever that thing was. You know, I just said that Lynn got the big 4-0.
Mm-hmm.
And then Noelle shows up with her 37 months. Thank you so much. 3 years ago, I gave myself the birthday gift of Primetime Aquatics membership, in large part in gratitude for getting me through 2020 with sanity mostly intact. Well, thank you very much for being here the last 37 months.
Right.
We've got a really great community
Sure
with a lot of long-term hanger-outers, which is pretty awesome. Leslie, thank you so much for the super chat. Really appreciate it. Please talk about Undergravel filters. Oh, don't you worry. They're coming up, I promise. In fact, for you, they're coming up next. All right. After this quick commercial break, I'm hoping they will make a comeback.
Maybe
Best
after the intermission.
After the intermission, the best air-driven filters. They are overlooked. They are certainly not as popular as they used to be. I will grant you that. Thank you so much for the super chat. And on behalf of you, let's talk about the Undergravel filter. And you're absolutely right. So in my fish keeping hobby, like I said, we started out with the air-driven box filters. Then I think the fish keeping hobby, at least in terms of filtration, two things happened. Air-driven filtration. Now, again, I can only go back to what I can remember, right? So I'm speaking from personal experience and at least the way that I remember things. And again, I was a kid, so I'm not saying I'm an expert at remembering the trends of filtration throughout the 70s and 80s. Obviously, I remember a lot more as we go into the 90s. But for filtration, it was a lot of the box filters. Hang-on back filters were out there, but I don't think they were quite as popular, although they were certainly being used in the 70s and even before that. We've got the old Dynaflow mono motor filter right there, which is a hang-on back, which is an old filter. But in terms of air-driven filtration, two things were happening. The hang-on back filters were becoming more popular, and then the Undergravel filters, which had also been around for a long time, but you started to see them, at least in the pet stores, just being part of the aquarium kits, right? I can, even in the 1990s, I can remember getting 75-gallon aquariums and the 150-gallon aquarium, and they had the Undergravel plates and the Undergravel filter. And so this is an air-driven system, and you can see how it works here. This picture, I know we're kind of blocking the left-hand side, but trust me, it's all basically the same. What's happening is, again, you're using air to create uplift, which is creating a current. And so unlike the other filters, what's happening is the water is going through the substrate. It's going under the Undergravel plate, and then it's coming back up through those long uplift tubes, which is creating a lot of flow. Now, the question is, why are they not as popular as they used to be? And again, I've done videos on this stuff. If you want to see things that are more in depth, check out the videos that I have in the description. I promise you we will go into much greater detail. So Undergravel filters, one, I think they're the least obvious, or pretty close to the least obvious filtration type that you will see in terms of air-driven systems, because the only thing you're really seeing are the uplift tubes. And often they are clear, or sometimes you'll see them in black PVC against a dark background, and they can be rather, again, they're pretty well hidden. So that is certainly an advantage. There's almost, I shouldn't say no, There's fewer chemical filtration options. Now, they used to sell, and maybe some places still do. I can remember there would be an attachment at the end of the elbow for the uplift tube at the very, very top where that blue arrow is pointing to the left. There would be a little thing that you could click onto the elbow where there would be carbon in there, so activated carbon. So you could certainly do that, but it was a fairly small attachment even for larger tanks, but it was certainly a potential option there. I think the reason why they have fallen out of favor, there's really two reasons. One, relative to non-air driven systems, the mechanical filtration is not as good, right? And even compared to other types of air driven filtration, the mechanical part of it, the mechanical filtration can be, depending on how you maintain your other air driven systems in the media, it can be not as good. But the big thing, the number one thing is, in some ways, you can be limited in terms of what you do with your aquarium. So let me explain. If you have any fish that dig in an aquarium, so a lot of your cichlids, the South Central American cichlids, your larger ones, a lot of your African cichlids, the minute they dig a hole in the substrate, if you haven't already blocked the filter, and so what some people will do is they'll the undergravel plate will lay down flat against the bottom of the aquarium. What most people do is they just stack gravel on top. So thing number one, you really do, for the undergravel filter to work optimally, you really do need some gravel. All right, so you need the ability of water to flow through. If you're using sand, that can be a problem for a couple reasons. One, it doesn't really allow for a lot of water to go through. It's really difficult for water to do that, if not almost impossible. And two, there's little like slats all throughout the undergravel filter. And so if the sand is there, it's just going to clog those up. And eventually it's probably going to seep through those little slits in the undergravel filter, fall to the actual glass, and then you don't have flow anymore. So that's one problem, is you really do need the gravel to make this thing work. The second thing is, if any fish dig in that gravel and expose the undergravel filter, now you're not getting anywhere close to the biological filtration that you should be getting, because all the water is taking the path of least resistance and it's going through the part that was dug through, going under the filter plate itself and then back up. And so all that gravel that is supposed to serve as surface area for beneficial bacteria, the water's not flowing through that. Some people will use like egg crate and put that, or like a light diffuser, and put that down on top of the filter plate and then put the gravel on there. So even if the fish dig, they can't get it all the way down to the plate itself. So that's one thing you can do. But the other potential issue there is, if you ever have an undergravel filter and you look under the aquarium, what do you see? And if you were to stick your head under the aquarium, and I've done this, fish dookies. Yep. Lots and lots of fish dookies. The issue there is when the fish waste is under that plate, it's breaking down. So it's organic material that's breaking down by microbes that are chemoorganotrophs. In other words, these are microbes that are they feed on organic material. And when they do that, they are releasing nitrogen-based compounds, i.e., nitrate, into the aquarium, and that stuff is not as easily removed as if the filter plate wasn't there in the first place, because now the fish waste is trapped between the plate and the glass of the bottom of the aquarium. Is it possible to get that out if you put like a siphon down through the uplift tube and try to get it out that way? It is possible, but it's really hard in a larger tank to remove some of that stuff, and so you could possibly have higher nitrate concentrations with an undergravel filter. The other thing,
do you want to go into that? Because I need to leave in 2 minutes.
Yes, I want to finish this thought.
All right, finish your thought.
The other thing is, if you have a planted tank and you have heavily rooted plants, the roots, if they start growing into those openings in the undergravel plate, they can block water flow. And if they do that very thoroughly, like if you had a tank full of crypts and sword plants, that can potentially block the water flow from going through the substrate and back up the uplift tube. So there are ways to get around some of this stuff, but I think that's why the undergravel filters, for the most part, have kind of fallen out of favor toward, and moved towards other air-driven systems. Now, you want to do the giveaway because you need to leave because you're so important.
Because Eli's so important.
Okay, so we're jumping ahead a little bit because we're not going in order. In fact, I'm going to explain this in a minute. But for right now, our giveaway this evening is, it's not this particular one, and this is dirty. Sorry, I just picked it out of the fish room. It was leaning up against the thing. This is a Matten filter. We're going to be talking about all the awesome advantages of the Matten filter very, very soon, I promise. But for right now, because she needs to leave soon and I need 2 people to do this giveaway, a winner today is going to get a Matten filter. It is from our sponsor, Flip Aquatics. Flip Aquatics sells awesome fish and shrimp and hard goods as well. So if you are so inclined, check out flipaquatics.com. Their information is in the description. And we're going to be giving this away, but there's another thing. The reason why you're going to want to check the description is Flip Aquatics has also given us a 15% off discount code for any size Matten filters.
Really?
On their website. So, and it's good till the end of the week. So it's good till Sunday at midnight.
Nice.
So even if you don't win and you're interested in a Matten filter after I get done talking about them in a few minutes, go to flipaquatics.com. You type in Prime Time Matten.
Oh.
The code is actually in the description, so check it out. So you type in Primetime Matten and you'll get 15% off your Matten filter purchases. And they actually have 2 different foam thick or pore densities now. So one that is really good for shrimp, it's a little bit finer pore, and then one that they're using for fish that's a little bit thicker pore, so it will not clog quite as fast. I actually like this stuff, the small pore. For even fish. I think this is awesome. So I'm going to explain why it's awesome. But for right now, because like I said, we're on a time crunch here, we're going to do this a little bit out of order. And we are going to be doing the giveaway here. And so the thing is, you have to be in the 48 states because this thing is going to be shipped directly from Flip Aquatics. What I'm going to do is I will give them the winner's information, and then you guys can reach out to one another and you can figure out, you can get any size that you want, any style, any size of Matten filter, the winner. But now, to win this thing, you have to be able to do 2 things at once. Thing number 1.
But first be it all messages.
The first thing you have to be able to do is, all right, now listen first. Don't start typing stuff in because there's 2 things. Are you ready? You're going to pick a number between 10 and 20, but don't start typing it in because you will not have all the information. And you have to get the right number between 10 and 20, and you have to tell me what fish I stocked in my tank for Sunday. You can go ahead and go. So you have to have both the right number and the name or the type of fish that I put in my video on Sunday's video. All right, now you can feel free to type away, but you need both of them in the same answer. So you need the name of the fish and the number, the correct number. So I only see numbers here, but you're going to need both. You're going to need both. There's no acaras from Sunday. I put no acaras in the tank on Sunday. I know everybody's saying that. Nope, no CPDs either.
You've got one with the right fish.
I got the right fish, but the wrong number. I see
by the
right
way.
fish. Oh, done. We're done.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah, we are totally done. So you can stop typing in. You can stop typing numbers and
Who do you
fish.
That's right.
Yeah, you got
I'll double check.
right here. So hold on, we're going to double check right now. That was a tough one, right? And like, oh, dang it. One person said Acara. Everybody's like, it's got to be Acara. The first person said that. No. You see what happens when you go with the flow? So let's just check. All right, so go ahead and show the number. The number is 14, and the fish that I put in the aquarium was goldfish. There's actually 5 of them in there. And then, so Noelle, by the way, Noelle, you are the winner, which means what you need to do is send me your address and stuff, and then I will send that to Flip Aquatics and let them know, and then they will reach out to you and say, hey, what do you want? What Matten filter do you want? Because you can pick any size. They go all the way from 10 gallons up to 55 gallon, I believe. So they have a big, old, giant selection. But again,
cool.
Even if you didn't win the giveaway, guess what? Wait a minute. No way.
On your birthday.
Happy birthday.
Noelle, happy
That's
birthday.
Pretty stinking
Today's
awesome.
The 7th, February 7th.
Yeah.
Right, a month
Oh
after
my God.
my
You know
mom's.
she's going to remember that.
I'm going to try and remember it. I have the worst.
You have to write it down. So yeah, send, I didn't actually finish my thought. You go. Bye-bye.
Primetime giveaway
At yahoo.com.
at yahoo.com.
Yeah. So
Send it, Happy birthday, Noelle. Oh my gosh. Oh,
Yeah,
that's
so
so exciting. A birthday
congratulations.
present.
But again, everybody's a winner here because we
Everybody's a
have that
winner.
discount code in the description if you would like to purchase a Matten filter, try it out. And again, you might want to after I get done actually talking about the advantages and disadvantages of said filters here in a moment.
And
after Joanna leaves us.
Before I leave, did we thank our awesome moderators?
We will do that. We always do.
Oink
So,
and
yeah.
Whip and Lynn.
Yep.
Second floor.
Very cool.
Okay, I have to go now.
Yeah. Peace out.
Bye.
Everybody say peace out.
Everybody have a
I don't know
nice
that anybody
rest
ever
of the
get
week.
it was a really obscure quote that I had, the movie quote. I don't think anybody got it. Word,
Oh,
Nick.
no.
Word, Dad.
Can you tell me what it is? Because
I'm not going to tell you now. I will tell you at some point in the future, but I'm not going to ruin it for other people who might not. They might still be playing the game. Hold on. Okay. Moving all the stuff. So now that we've done that, we have some more filtration to talk about. Oh my gosh. And okay, so we talked about the Undergravel. All right, so we got the box filter, we have the Undergravel filter, and I would say those are filters who their time was at one point a thing, and we don't see them nearly as much now. Let me see, where am I at here? I still need to move over a little bit. We don't see them nearly as much as we used to because they have been, for the most part, replaced by this guy. Where is it? Where's my prop? You can see it there in the video with that dirty glass. There's a gnarly looking sponge filter. Here there's me talking about sponge filters. I hope the audio is not on that because that would look lame. So there's me talking about sponge filters. Look, isn't this weird? I should do the same thing. Wait, I'm going the wrong way. Sponge filter, blah, 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 blah. Anyway, we've got the sponge filter here. Let me get back to just me. This thing has become one of the most popular, if not the most popular, air-driven filtration media, if you will, on the face of the earth. And there's a lot of reasons why. I did a video, and I'm convinced that a lot of people who left comments on that video actually didn't watch the entire video. They just got mad because I was ripping sponge filters, and they didn't actually see the end of the video. But I did a video called "Sponge Filters Are the Worst." In some ways they are, but in some ways they're actually really valuable. So the sponge filter, first of all the air-driven systems that we have talked about and will talk about, this is the easiest to maintain. Hold on. We got to let the squeaky door happen, and you all know why. I don't do that. I don't make it unsqueaky because that way, like when my older son comes home, he's never sneaking in the house, ever. If he comes home late, I will know because either he's got to go in through the garage and the garage door is right above our bedroom and I will hear that, or he's got to come in through the front door, and y'all just heard that. And trust me, in real life, because these microphones are really good at eliminating noise, it's way squeakier. So it wakes up the entire house. Okay. Sponge filter, by far the easiest to clean. You take this thing out. Basically what I do is the air line is connected in here to the uplift tube. You take this thing apart. This pops out. A lot of people are shocked to know, but I've done multiple videos on the science behind why this thing is perfectly fine to clean in chlorinated tap water for the few seconds, 10 or 15 seconds it's going to be in there. Rinse it out, make sure it's nice and ready to go. There's no more brown stuff coming out of it. Back in the tank it goes. Never had a problem doing that. I've done 80 tanks worth of sponge filters, all of the filters, all at the same time, every single time. Never an issue, a single time. So easiest to clean. Unlike the box filter, not quite as noticeable because of the color. Once this thing gets in the water, it tends to blend in a little bit easier. The downside is, well, you really don't have a space here for chemical filtration if that is your thing. Mechanical filtration is okay as long as you maintain them properly. Like we clean these things every single week. That's why we have sponge filters in our aquariums and they still look relatively clean in terms of there's not as much stuff floating around. Not saying that they're perfect. Sometimes if you've got a heavily stocked tank, you still might have some things floating around because there's only so much you can do with an air-driven system in terms of sucking stuff, mechanical filtration, sucking things out of the water. The other cool thing is you get lots of sizes. I think these are ATI sponge filters. They're hydros. They come in different sizes. There's a Hydro 0 all the way up to Hydro 5. I believe this is a Hydro 1 short because there's two different types of Hydro 1s. One is twice as tall but much thinner, and then this one is a little bit thicker but it's shorter. So these are really good, and often you can cut these uplift tubes. So if you had like a smaller tank, like a 10-gallon or a 5-gallon, you wanted to put this in there, you could do that. I could lower this thing, and so this base that's right here, you can take that off to make this sit closer to the substrate. A lot of people ask, do you need the uplift tube? You don't need it per se, but it does help move water through a little bit more efficiently. So you'll notice in our fish room, a lot of times we don't even have the uplift tube. People tend to freak out about that. I don't know why. It's not a big deal. The reason often we will do that is because these uplift tubes, depending on the fish that you have in the aquariums, sometimes there are fish, some loaches, some plecos, they'll actually get stuck in here and can't get their way back out. And then I've had fish get stuck in there and die. And so it's sometimes just the sponge filter itself. It will still work. It will still perform the biological filtration, but the mechanical filtration will definitely be reduced when you do that. So sponge filters, yeah, they are, and they're cheap, right? There's no moving parts other than the pump that you're using to drive the air. So this is good. We like these. They are in a lot of our tanks, especially all of our tanks on the fish room side now, none in the gallery, because again, I just don't want them appearing in the aquarium. So we have those. And then there is what I just showed you, the Matten filter. Let me show you what this looks like, if you will. In aquarium, I did a video. There's me talking, so that was not supposed to be starting there. Let me see if I can fast forward to showing you the Matten filter part of this where it's in the tank. There we go. Let's get my face off of there. That was really weird looking. Oh my gosh, stop talking here. So that's the Matten filter inside of a 10-gallon. That was one of these guys right here. That's the side view that you're seeing. And you can see the area behind the Matten filter where you've got this tube right here. And basically you've got a hole at the top. And then you can run the thing all the way down. And so let me show you a picture here. This is basically, that looks like a 10-gallon aquarium. And again, if this thing is just resting on the side and you've got a little bit of a gap. Now, here's what's great about the Matten filters and why I really think it's something to consider. They don't get enough love, in my opinion. They are not as popular as the sponge filters, and I don't know necessarily why that is. Well, I do know why it is, but and we'll talk about that. But these things are pretty awesome for a couple of reasons. One, of all the filtration that we talk about today, the air-driven systems, this has got by far the most surface area. You'd be like, well, wait a minute, what about the Undergravel filter? Not even close. And here's why. The Undergravel filter, yes, you've got a lot of substrate, but that gravel is large, right? And so what we talk about in biology is surface area to volume ratio. The smaller a three-dimensional structure is, the more surface area it has relative to its volume. So as something grows larger in 3 dimensions, your surface area is growing at a squared rate, but your volume is cubed. What that means is if you've got gravel in an aquarium, you've got a lot of it for sure, and there's a pretty big, square footage, but gravel is usually pretty large, the individual pieces of gravel. If you compare that to these tiny, tiny, tiny little pores, when it comes to beneficial bacteria surface area, this is going to absolutely annihilate the Undergravel filters. Now, here's another reason why these things are super cool. Look at this picture. Imagine this is your 10-gallon. Again, they come in all different sizes. Flip Aquatics has them all the way from 10 gallons up to, I believe when I went on the website, I saw at least a 55-gallon. They got the 40 breeders, the 29s, 20 longs, 20 talls, 10 gallons. The cool thing about them is imagine on the right-hand side where your Matten filter is. You're like, well, I can still see it. Yes, but what you could do is you could take a piece of tape and kind of tape off right where the end of that tank is, where the Matten filter appears, and you could actually paint that black or put some type of a covering on it or a window tint, and you would not even know that filter is there. And in essence, what it would look like is, for those of you who are familiar with like the Fluval Spec 5s or something like that, the all-in-one filters, where they have the filter compartment on one side of the aquarium, but it doesn't even look like a filter because it looks like a solid wall. And that's what you have here with the Matten filter is, essentially, you have a solid wall of filtration that just looks like it's supposed to be there, and it's dark in color. It's, believe it or not, probably the second most invisible, if you will, filter, especially if you were to paint that front part of the aquarium so that it doesn't even look like there's filtration there. So a big advantage there. The other huge advantage is the massive amount of surface area you have for your biological filtration. And depending on how much air you're running through the system, now you've got a pretty big filter that's capable of the mechanical filtration. True, you're not going to have the ability necessarily to run the chemical filtration like you would with the box filter, but like I said, the box filter for the most part is the only one that's giving you true ability to run a sufficient amount of mechanical filtration. So this thing is pretty awesome. Like I said, if you haven't had one of these, and by the way, there are these, and then there are also corner Matten filters that don't go across the entire side. They kind of curve into a corner, and the way that those work is usually you put in kind of like a subframe along the bottom and top of or usually at least the bottom, if not the top of the corner, and it just kind of fits in there. I've got people in our fish clubs that's all they run. They don't run the sponge filters, they just run these. The other advantage is because they're so large, you don't have to clean these as much. Now, there is a disadvantage, and some people have kind of mentioned this already. When you do have to clean them, you're going to have to be a little bit more careful because you've got to get these things so that when they fit in there, if you have especially if a tank where it has a rim like I'm showing you here, you're going to have to kind of move this over to the side, get this out. It's going to hold a ton of water. It's going to be heavy, right? So you pull this part out like this. I'm going to just go ahead and go back to our original screen here. But you pull this thing out, and then this comes out. In terms of making a mess with detritus, it really won't if you've got the finer pores. So the finer the pores in your filtration, whether it's a sponge filter or one of these, they're not going to spill out as much stuff into the aquarium. The only issue that I've ever had with these is when you pull them out of the tank, when you have substrate there, sometimes that substrate is going to want to creep back into where the Matten filter was originally sitting. So when you put it back in the aquarium, sometimes you have to move the substrate over again to get this thing back in. But it is a massive surface area. I know Flip Aquatics uses them extensively, especially in their shrimp tanks, because obviously, just like all the other air-driven systems we're talking about, they're shrimp safe, they're fry safe. So if you're breeding fish or breeding shrimp, this is a massive surface area for them. If you've ever bred shrimp or kept them, they're constantly picking on sponge filters, the Matten filters as well. So it is definitely a pretty cool potential filtration method. So like I said, if it's something you're interested in, check out Flip Aquatics because they had that 15% off there for you. Let's see here. I see Sinister. Welcome to being a Primetime member, Primetimer, Primate. Really appreciate it. Thank you very, very much. So those are generally, I think they're the basics of the air-driven filtration methods. There are other types of filtration methods out there. Like I said, you've got hang-on-back filters. You've got canister filters. You have the internal canister filters. You have filterless, where you're primarily using plants and lightly stocked tanks as well. So there's lots of other types, but at least in terms of the air-driven methods, I think those are pretty much the main ones. A lot of people ask, and I want to address this, and maybe I saw it in this comment area as well, but people ask all the time, especially when it comes to Undergravel filters or sponge filters, could I run like a wave maker or some type of something that's going to suck the water up a little bit faster? And the answer is yes, you can do that. So you could put like a wave maker, attach it to the uplift tube of an Undergravel filter or a sponge filter or a Matten filter for that matter. My only issue with doing that is it's not air driven anymore, first of all. So yeah, you still have that massive amount of filtration, but I don't understand. I would never do that. And the reason I would never do that is the minute I have to plug something in, right? So the minute I'm no longer air driven, I would much rather have a hang-on-back filter or a canister filter at that point, because either way, now you're plugging something in. Why would I want to look at something inside the aquarium that's still going to be at a disadvantage, that's still going to be a little bit more cumbersome to clean if I'm going to be plugging something in to try to suck more water through? So at that point, if I'm going to be using a wave maker type thing to suck water through something that's typically air driven, I would just as soon use the hang-on-back filter or canister. So that's just my personal feeling. You can certainly do whatever you want. It's not necessarily bad. Chris brings up a point, too much flow, bad for bacteria. Well, there's two different arguments there when it comes to flow. So whether it's air-driven, canister, hang-on-back, there's two ways to look at this. First of all, the bacteria in and of itself don't care about flow. They are attached to surfaces. It would be nearly impossible to produce enough flow to allow them to detach from a surface once they've established themselves. So we're not worried about that necessarily. I think what you're referring to, and rightly so, is if we're moving water too fast, will the microbes have sufficient time to capture the ammonia and nitrite to do the nitrification process? Well, there's a flip side to that too. And the flip side is, if the water was moving too slow, would it have access to enough ammonia or nitrite? And would there be ammonia or nitrite pockets within the water column if the water flow was moving too slow? And I think in both instances, the answer is probably not. I think people worry about it way more than they need to when it comes to water flow through filtration media. And so here's why. Potential problem number one, the water is moving really fast. Well, that also means that your water is cycling through the media a lot faster as well. That's giving the microbes more opportunities to catch, if you will, that ammonia or nitrite. And so I think for the most part, that kind of balances itself out. Hold on a second here. So that more or less balances itself out. If it's moving too slow, will the microbes have enough time or have the ability to capture that ammonia or nitrite? And the answer is, I still think yes, because as the microbes capture the ammonia and nitrite to use it as a food source, the ammonia and nitrite that's left is going to naturally disperse, right? So there's not a mechanism in them that's keeping it all together. So through simple diffusion, it is going to diffuse throughout the water column. And so I still think you're going to get plenty of opportunity to reduce the ammonia or nitrite. And so I don't think we have too many issues where I got an ammonia or a nitrite spike because the water flow was either too slow or too fast in my aquarium. It's more to do with bioload and whether or not the microbes have had sufficient time to acclimate to the bioload that's there. So hopefully that kind of answers that question. I know it was a long-winded answer for what was supposed to be a short question. All right, so all that being said, if you have questions, now is a great time to answer said questions. Let me see here. On here. Okay. Plugging something in. Yes, I don't know what that was. I was probably answering somebody else's question. Hold on. I just saw my thing is all screwed up over here. Where did it go? All right, hold on. Now I'm at the bottom. Oh, Brady, thank you so much for the super chat. Hello from Wisconsin cycled. Hello from, I would get it eventually. Hello from Wisconsin. Cycled my 65 gallon in 25 days with Fritz Zyme 7. And let's see here, tested, I'm assuming that's ammonia, every day. Then added 2 snowballs and 2 Java loaches 5 days ago with nitrate staying at less than 5. If all is good by Friday, can I add cardinals? 25 days with Fritzheim, then add. So so 5 days ago. So you added 2 snowballs, 2 Java loaches 5 days ago with nitrate staying low. If all is good by Friday, can I add cardinals? So you're waiting about a week, right? Let's go 2 weeks. I know it's fun to add stuff to an aquarium, but let's just make sure. And the nitrates, by the way, are not necessarily the issue. We just really, really want to make sure that we don't wind up with any ammonia or nitrite. The nitrates could stay low, and I don't know if you've got plants in that tank, but especially at the beginning, your nitrate levels could be very, very low. Let's keep an eye on the ammonia and nitrite. It sounds like, you've done the right things. You've got the Fritzheim 7 in there. So, yeah, let's just wait another week, and then you can add some cardinals. But I wouldn't, if you're planning on putting 30 cardinals in there, obviously, I'm sure you know this, but I wouldn't necessarily do that right away. I might just add 5 or 6. And then once you do that, because that's not going to be a heavy addition to the bioload, then you might be able to add 5 or 6 every 10 days or so, right? Until you get to that number that you actually want. But I might just wait a few more days for that one. Okay. So let's see what else we got here. Robert says, if I'm mixing RO with my tap water, what is my safe range of acceptable variance? If I keep it between 7.6 and 7.8, is that fine? Or does it need to be the exact same every water change? That's a good question. I think 7.6 to 7.8 is not a huge variance. And so I would probably be, let me go ahead and put that up the thing. I would probably be okay with that. 7.6 to 7.8, I would try to limit it as much as I can. And so your goal, obviously, over time is when you're mixing the RO water, and you'll eventually get this. So eventually what you want to be able to do is you want to be able to get to a point where you know exactly how much water you have to change and how much of a percentage of RO you're going to add. And then once you have that done, you'll just do that every time. And that will make life a lot easier for you and hopefully stabilize it at a very, very consistent pH. Because even with a 7.6 to 7.8, remember the pH scale is logarithmic, and so it's not a 0.2 change. I guess that would be what would that be, 20 times change in the concentration. So just keep that in mind. But yeah, that's just try to be as stable with it as you can. All right, Evan says, how old should peacock gudgeons be before selling, and how many in a 20-gallon of that fish size? Okay, so how old should peacock gudgeons be before selling them? So if you've bred them and you have them, I would say 3/4 of an inch to an inch is probably pretty good. I've had, I've bred many of those fish, thousands of them. And I actually just recently bought some from somebody who bought them for me, and then they bred them and they brought back like 60 or 70 of them, and they were a little under an inch, and they were pretty close. I mean, at that point, they're colored up, they're showing great personality. At that point, you're pretty much at 3/4 of an inch getting to see, okay, here's my males, here's my females. So that's not a bad size. They're going to get to be about 1.5 inches, 1 3/4. Males a little bit longer, females a little bit rounder. In a 20-gallon, well, okay, for breeding, and I think even when I did the species profile, and I know there was a number of fish room tours that I did where I had, I don't even know, in a 20-gallon, 30 or 40 at least. I remember in a 37-gallon, which has the same length and width as a 20 long, I had hundreds in there. I'm not saying that's what you do long term, but when you're breeding them, that's just what's going to happen because they have so many fry. Long term, if it was just a community tank and a 20-gallon, again, if you're growing them out, just leave them all together. They're going to be fine. I mean, I never had an issue keeping dozens and dozens and dozens and dozens, if not 100 peacock gudgeons in a 20 long just for them to grow out. They behaved perfectly fine with one another. But long term, it might be nice to have, if you want to absolutely cut down on potential issues, maybe a male and 4 or 5 females. The females more or less leave each other alone. Sometimes if you get a bunch of males, and especially if they haven't grown up together, you might get a little bit of a battle going on there. Mine never did, but I know people who said, hey man, my male peacock gudgeons were rough on one another. If you've got multiple caves, that will definitely be reduced, because especially if they start breeding in there, the males are going to spend a bunch of time in the caves anyway. So they're going to pretty much be too busy caring for eggs and trying to get those eggs released into fry into the tank. So yeah. All right, let's see what else we got. Oh, good question. Mike says, is there a tool to accurately measure dissolved oxygen? Yes, there is. It's expensive. It's something that I've looked into doing more as a curiosity than anything else. And when I looked at the lab grade dissolved oxygen tools, they were many hundreds of dollars. So the less expensive ones aren't going to be nearly as reliable. So if you really want to measure dissolved oxygen, you're going to be spending $500, $600, $700 on a high quality lab grade tool. The rest of them, like I said, I just wouldn't trust them. But and I don't necessarily know how useful it is for the everyday fish keeper. I was going to be doing it more as an experiment. And I still may do this for some other things that I was working on. Certainly more important if you've got large scale breeding ponds and stuff like that. But for the most part, it's a lot of money for, I think, what would wind up being more minimal payback. Sinister says, are snails better than shrimp when it comes to being a cleanup crew? And I'm glad I made it for your live stream. Well, I'm glad you're here. So let's see here. They serve different purposes. So snails, generally speaking, if you've got algae on the surface of your glass, on the surface of decorations, they tend to, in my opinion, do a better job of just diatom algae, the softer green algae, some of that harder algae. They tend to do a better job there, where the the shrimp come in is some shrimp, well, like the Amano shrimp, they like the green hair algae, where if the green hair algae is well established, sometimes the nearite snails, the mystery snails don't do a whole lot with that, where the Amano shrimp will. From the start, the shrimp are going to be picking at surfaces, and so they might keep that down from the start. So if it's more the surface type algae, I would prefer the snails, but you can certainly do both. So if you've got the room, at least a 5-gallon aquarium, it is definitely possible to do both at the same time. Let's see here. Suzanne says, I believe I have a geo that is holding fry. She has not eaten in 4 days. How long will she hold? Should I move her to an empty tank? Thoughts? It depends. Some of the geos, they don't hold as long, or they will actually shift. Some of the males will also hold, and they'll swap. So it depends on the type of geo. The way that you know for sure if she's holding is she's going to look like she's chewing on something. All right. So fish that are holding fry, the cichlids that hold fry in their mouth, their mouth gets pretty large. You'll see their throat get pretty large, and they're constantly like look like they're kind of chewing on something or moving something around in their mouth. That is usually the way that you will know. If that is indeed the case, yeah, definitely move her to an empty tank. Let her be by herself, because at that point, the fish are a little bit less. They can't protect themselves as easily. They're more stressed out. They're going to hide a lot more as well anyway, and just want to be left alone. So you can reduce a lot of stress by moving a holding female. We do that pretty much every time I see a holding female. As soon as I see it in a 10-gallon, they can just hang out, and that is just how I roll. Oink, thank you so much for being a member the last 28 months. Appreciate it. Should I have a hypnotist speak to my multis while they sleep to not hide from me so much? Did it take time for yours not to hide all the time? Yeah, the multis they're a little strange sometimes. They can do that at first, and then they just get more and more confident. The older that they get, the more that and certainly the larger the group too. I think group size plays a big role with a lot of the shell dwellers, whether it's multis or similis, or even sometimes the more confident shell dwellers like the gold ocellatus and stuff like that. They tend to be more confident as more and more of the fish start to inhabit the tank, as they start to breed more. But yeah, give them a little bit of time. A lot of people ask, hey, should I put in some type of a dither fish? Sometimes that helps, but at the same time, that can also be a really dangerous thing to do depending on the fish, depending on the height of the tank, because once the multis do start to breed, they become a little bit, or in some cases, a lot more aggressive. So you just have to be careful with that route, but just be patient with them. They do get better over time. Allison, thank you very much for the super chat. At Primetime Aquatics, what air pump would you suggest to run sponge filters in 6 10-gallon tanks? Want to set up a guppy breeding in most inexpensive way. So you're definitely on the right track there. If you've got, you said you got 6 10-gallon tanks, you're getting to a point where air-driven systems make sense. Now, unfortunately, this is where I'm probably not going to be as helpful when it comes to the smaller air pumps. I don't really know, because I've been so disconnected from smaller air-driven systems, because we've got the one large central pump, and it's been running for the last 8 years or so, and I haven't had a need to buy smaller pumps. Now, I can tell you, people ask this about heaters too. If I needed a small, just a common air pump, but here, even with 6 tanks, you're probably going to have to go online and get something bigger than what you would normally find at a PetSmart or a Petco. But that's usually where I go when I need a small pump. I just do what everybody else does. Like, oh, here's the little Whisper pump, and yeah, they last a few years, and then they break, and then you get a new one. So I don't really know what is a good, and maybe somebody else does. If you've got this situation, if you know what's a good pump that's going to run 6 10-gallon tanks, because it doesn't need to be very large. And I think almost all of the air pumps that like a Gemco would sell are going to be way too big for that many tanks. I almost wonder if you almost have to go the Amazon route and look for, okay, what's a pump that is going to, a medium-sized pump that's going to allow me to run 6 outlets at a time that's getting decent reviews, because I that's probably the way you're going to have to go. If somebody else has an opinion, I would love to hear it, but I don't know on that size. John says, could you ask Gemco what would work? You could, but usually, like I said, usually they're dealing with large systems. And so I don't think they really sell pumps that would do that few tanks. Do you guys have a Discord? We do not have a Discord, but I do. We try to, for the smaller answerable questions, I always tell people, leave comments on YouTube videos. That's the number one place I go. People will sometimes try to reach out to me on Instagram or Facebook, and it's so rare that I actually check messages on either the posts or like Facebook Messenger or the Instagram stuff. I will see stuff like, oh my gosh, somebody just sent me this question like 6 weeks ago. It's like, hey, my fish is in trouble. I'm like, oh man, I just saw this now. The best way to get questions answered is obviously here on the live streams, because now I'm answering your specific question. But people who have questions try to, often if they leave them associated with some type of a YouTube video, that's the place where I'm most likely to see it. But to try to manage, for me to be in another social media platform I just wouldn't be able to do it, because it's hard enough for me to keep up with all the YouTube stuff, plus the infrequent times I go into Instagram and Facebook, and then all the emails and everything like that. Like, unfortunately, even the emails now, there's an automated message that just comes through. It's like, hey, if this is about an order, I'll get back to you. But if it's not, leave a message on the YouTube videos, because it could be a long time before I ever get back to an email. It's just not a great way. Lynn says, I have a couple Amazon pumps running 6 to 8 sponge filters in my living room. All right, so yeah, and again, I don't know in terms of which ones are great and which ones are not great when it comes to stuff like that. All right, let's see here. Smashing Game says, why are my fish always swimming in the high current area of my sponge filter, ember tetras and neons? They love it. Some fish just like they like the current a little bit. It was funny, we had a 5-gallon, we had the fluval speck down in the living room at one point, and Joanna had put in, it was either chilies, no, it was dwarf raspboras, and they would all line up. There was like 12 or 14 of them in this little 5-gallon. They're super tiny fish. And the return, it was actually a decent amount of current, and they would all line up and they would all face that current. They just absolutely loved it. So it's one of the things that they do. It's crazy, but if fish are doing it, let them do it. Let them have fun. Because now, if they're doing it because they are lacking oxygen somewhere or they're sick, that's one thing. Like sometimes you'll see some fish and they're just like constantly next to the filter and they're breathing heavy. That tells you something is a little bit wrong there. Mac has been a member for 9 months. Thank you so much. What did you miss? Just the secret to life. We talked about the secrets to life, and then we just moved on and we said, okay, well, that's everything. So no, you just missed all the people being awesome, but you're awesome too. And now you're here. Karen says, what exactly causes hair algae? Too many nitrates, too much light, or just too many nitrates, one of the two. So especially in tanks that are either lightly planted, and if they're getting too much nitrate or they're getting or too much light, you will see that. The other thing too with the green hair algae is you'll tend to see that popping up in areas of the aquarium that has lower flow. It tends to grow a little bit faster in those areas. So not that putting high flow stuff will completely eliminate it, but at least that's what I've noticed in our fish room. Alrighty here. I'll watch back later, says Mac. Yeah, you can always restart from the beginning at some point. Suzanne says, I believe my Geo is an Ultrafrons. What size tank would be safe for her? It depends on the size. Again, probably if it's close to full grown, probably any kind of a 20-gallon would be fine. Because I know our Ultrafrons before it died was at least 10 inches. So putting in a 10-gallon would not have been a good idea. That probably in and of itself would have stressed the fish out. So 20-gallon just to let the fish just kind of get through the process would be the way to go. Cody, thank you so much for the super chat. Really appreciate it. Would like to find new buddies who are in the aquarium hobby, as it is my passion, but really only have my brother and one friend who are into the hobby. Where would you recommend I look? Great question. So the number one place I think to go when it comes to, looking for people who share the common hobby. Obviously, you've got all the Facebook groups. Those can be kind of toxic at times, depending on the group, where you try to ask a question, you try to answer a question, and sometimes people just find the need to rip everybody else apart. I found that to be more the norm than the exception, unfortunately. But I would definitely look for aquarium clubs in your area. So, for us in the Chicagoland area, we have the Greater Chicago Cichlid Association, the Greenwater Aquarium Society, we have the Chicago Plant Society, we have the Chicago Live Bearer Society. Just those four, and I'm sure there are others as well. But so in your area, there might be fish clubs where they just kind of hang out. Maybe they meet every month, maybe once a quarter, hang out. Maybe they have a speaker. I know our fish clubs, sometimes they'll have a speaker come in depending on the club. They'll do little raffles. They will have, local fish stores and companies donate stuff to them for raffles. They will do breeder awards programs. And that was a good suggestion too, Chris, is, even the local mom and pop local fish stores, sometimes they will know of meetings and places to kind of hang out and meet people who share a similar interest in fish. Sinister, thank you so much for the super chat. This may be silly, but do betta fish get lonely? I got my 8-year-old daughter a betta fish in a 5-gallon tank. Is there a safe tank made for her betta in such a small tank? That's a great question. Not really. Betta fish a lot of times are not a lot of times. They are typically going to be fish that like to be on their own, especially the males. That's why you can't put them together, because they wipe each other out. Even trying to put a male betta with a female, if they breed, you got to remove the female right away. So they really don't get along well with one another. And so it's not a fish that really needs interaction with other fish, in my opinion. In a 5-gallon, the only thing that I know that we've done for sure that will work is a mystery snail, but it's not like the betta fish is like, oh, thank goodness the mystery snail is here. Now I got somebody to talk to. And then the mystery snail doesn't speak the same language because it's a snail, and the betta fish is a fish. Now they can't communicate. It's even more frustrating. And now they're looking at each other and be like, what are you doing in my space? But anyway, all right, none of that part's true. But yeah, in a 5-gallon, it's fine on its own. I mean, that's pretty much the way they're mostly kept. So don't worry, you're not doing anything bad by keeping the fish in there all by itself. Primetime Aquatics, is mold that grows on wood dangerous to fish? It's not white fuzz. They're green spots. No, the green spots is algae, and it's usually perfectly fine. I've actually got some types of algae that especially it starts on wood, where it almost looks like, people have actually asked me, like, what is that? It's really pretty, because it grows almost like a moss, and it looks absolutely fantastic. And so when I get that type of growth on the driftwood, I try to do everything I can to keep it there, because it actually looks really cool. But not pretty much any type of algae, for the most part, is not going to be dangerous towards fish. Sometimes they just leave it alone, right? I mean, there are fish that just don't eat certain types of algae. Chris says, Dragonstone failed the test. Fizz, can I still use it? Yeah, I don't find that test to be particularly compelling. The test that Chris is referring to is when you drop acetic acid on wood, or I'm sorry, on rocks, and if it fizzes, that will tell you that whether or not it's aquarium safe. That's not 100% true, because you can drop that stuff on lots of different rocks that you'll find in rivers, you'll find in ponds, you'll find all over lakes. You'll find, for instance, if I take some of the flagstone that I've got in a million different tanks of mine, and I drop acetic acid on there, it's going to fizz. All that means is you've got a chemical reaction happening. What you have to be careful about is you don't want a lot of metallic stuff in the rocks, and not all rocks are safe, but pretty much for the most part, first of all, the Dragonstone is fine. I put that stuff in all kinds of tanks in the past. So that test is, I don't know where it got the support that it got to say, okay, this is definitely not aquarium safe, because again, if you look at a lot of the rocks I've put in aquariums and you do that test and it fizzes, that doesn't mean that it's dangerous necessarily, but it does mean that it could potentially alter water parameters. So in my case, because our water, we've got hard water, we have a high pH already. When I add flagstone to my aquarium, it doesn't do anything, because my pH is already between an 8 and 8.2. My water hardness is already hard, so it's not going to be dissolving as fast when there's already a high amount of minerals in the water and the pH is already high. What I tell people is, if you want to see if the rock is going to alter the measurable water parameters, so GH, KH, and pH, take a 27-gallon tote, put some air stones in there, get it up to temperature, throw the rocks in there, measure it before you do. Let the stuff be in there for a month. See if you have any noticeable change. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that the rock is safe, because again, if it's leaching heavy metals into the aquarium, that's a different story. And that's not something that you can usually pick up using your standard water testing kits and stuff like that. But at least in terms of GH, KH, and pH, you'll be able to see that right away. So if there's ever a concern, instead of using the acetic acid test, which I find to be, at least for our water parameters, more or less not all that useful, do it that way. And that would help give you a little bit more peace of mind, I would say. Wink says, speaking of filtration, thank you for understanding my caution with the 20-gallon high infinity waterfall tank. My research for what inhabitants can handle its unique features continues. Yeah, that's a cool aquarium. The big thing with the waterfall aquarium is if it's going to come right out the top and into the splash area. But yeah, it's very cool. Smashing says, I had to do an emergency water change as my nitrate spiked to 50 parts per million and ammonia 0.5. However, I ran out of water conditioner. What could I have done? No spare tanks or RODI. That's a good question. So I guess first question is, nitrate doesn't usually spike. It usually builds over time unless you add a lot of bioload, I suppose, to an aquarium. Maybe you put a bunch of new fish in a tank. But usually nitrate is not something that will spike. Ammonia certainly can, and nitrite can if there's a disruption to the biological filtration. So either way, all right, so you brought up a good question. So 50 parts per million on the nitrate, 0.5 on the parts per million on the ammonia. You ran out of water conditioner. What could I have done? Well, I think, man, especially if you're looking at a pretty large water change with the 50 parts per million on the nitrate, because you'd probably want to do a 50%. It partially depends on what is going on with your tap water. If it's chlorine or chloramines, the chlorine will gas off. And so what I would maybe potentially do, and I'm not saying this would be 100% safe, but if you fill the tote through an air stone in there with chlorine, it will eventually break down and gas off. With the chloramines, that's going to take a little bit longer. It's a little bit more, it's got a little bit longer half-life. So other than that, boy, I think that's pretty much, yeah, I mean, that's probably what the main thing that I would do is air stones and put it in a different container to let it try to gas off. I mean, back in the old days, they didn't even have water conditioners. They would just tell us, hey, fill up a reservoir and leave it for a day or two, and then it'll be safe. Whip says nitrates spiked at 50 parts per million. Mine comes out of the tap at 50 parts per million. Yeah. I know that can be a real headache for people when that happens. Okay, let's see here. Second floor says, how do you deal with that? Well, with the nitrates being that high, you can do, I mean, if it were me, I probably would have to you can run a filtration system, not necessarily RODI, but you can run it through activated carbon right from your, I'm assuming with nitrates that high, you're probably running a well, because tap water, generally speaking, doesn't come out, or at least city water from city ground or surface water usually doesn't come out that high. But if you're running a well or something like that, you can run it through a whole house, not a water softener, but a filtration system, activated carbon. It will pull most of that out. You could go RODI, and that would pull everything else out, and then you got to remineralize. So that's a couple different ways. You can use some water conditioners to detoxify the nitrate, but that's not necessarily always helping the situation. So yeah, it's tough to deal with for sure. And 50 parts per million nitrate is not going to be immediately toxic to fish. So it's not like we're dealing with ammonia or nitrite where, oh my gosh, almost, if you've got a concentration of 0.5 or 1, 2, 3 parts per million, it's like, oh, my fish are getting ready to do bad things. That is more of a situation where it's just not ideal when it comes to water. The other thing that you can do long-term is you can put plants in when it's possible. I know, Whip, you keep a lot of larger fish, and so maybe that would be an ideal situation where if I'm keeping really large fish in large tanks, I've got a sump. And I don't usually think this type of media is really all that valuable. But if I had a sump system in a larger tank where I was running 50 parts per million out of the tap, there's a couple things I would do. One, that sump system would have a light, and I would put all kinds of pothos and land plants in there that where the roots could be partially submerged, or maybe I'd have a gravel tray where the water is kind of dripping through, and the land plants are pulling those nitrates out, because land plants, if you're looking to lower nitrate concentrations, are going to do a much better job than aquatic plants, because the CO2 concentrations in the air are much higher than they are in the water. And therefore, plants that are going to be exposed to nitrate, they're going to be able to use that more efficiently because they're going to be able to suck out more CO2 from the air than they can the water. So they're typically faster growing. Obviously, part of that depends on the plant. So certainly I would have that. Lots of pothos or some type of semi-aquatic or land plant where roots can be semi-submerged without getting rot. That would pull a lot of the nitrate out. The other thing I was going to say, what I don't always agree that this is a good thing for the vast majority of fish keepers, but they do have the biomedia that produce or that has anaerobic pockets that will produce anaerobic microbes to a certain amount that can potentially lower nitrate. The problem with that media that I have is most of the time it's not practical for people who are running hang-on back filters or smaller canister filters. It doesn't make any sense. The plants just do a much better job. Stephanie says, I wonder how many neon type tetras and or cories would you put in a 16-gallon aquarium, 16-gallon tank? Well, I'm going to make an assumption that your 16-gallon has this roughly the same footprint, right? So length and width, pretty close to a 20-gallon. And, you know, a lot of times the 16 gallons are cubes. If I were doing tetras, I would definitely stay on the smaller side with the tetras. So nothing larger than a typical like green neon or maybe even an ember tetra, especially the embers. The embers would be nice. I think you could do 8 to 10 at least to start to see what that looks like. The green neons of all the neon types stay the smallest. That's another one where you could probably do 6 to 8 or something like that. The Cory cats, that's another one where I'd want to stay on the smaller side of the Cory cat range. So maybe we're looking at pygmy cories, habrosus cories. Pandas are about as big as I would go on the 16-gallon side. So I would stay there with that just because that 16-gallon might not have it doesn't have a lot of volume and it doesn't have a huge footprint. So, oh my gosh. Yes, everybody knows the front door opened. Joanna is home. The screen door. Yep, that's actually the front door. Well, both doors are squeaky. The screen door going out and then the main door. I might just have to spray it down a little bit just to keep the noise down a little bit. But yeah, I know it's noisy. Go Brickley says, how many Congo and Emperor tetras would you think would be okay to put in a 120? So first of all, that's a great, potentially awesome stocking option for that size tank. Congos and Emperors. In a 120, I'm going to assume that your 120 is the 4-foot 120, 4 foot by 2 feet by, what is that, about 20 something inches tall or so, 20 inches tall. I'd start out with probably a dozen Congos at least, and at least a dozen Emperor tetras, assuming that you're putting other things in the aquarium. If that was all you're putting in there, easily 15 to 20 of each would be fine. But if you're doing other things, that would be a really cool start. And you could probably do more at some point. That would be awesome. Let's see here. Malcolm says, will UV light eat up nitrates? No. UV light is really good for destroying water column parasites. That's about all in like things like green water and stuff like that. But for nitrate, it doesn't really do much. All right. Oh my gosh. All right, everybody. I just realized that the reason why Joanna's home is because it's already 9:30 in the evening and we just ran a little bit over. But we're going to end it here because it's night time for a lot of us. We're getting tired. Thank you for being here. Thank you to our moderators for holding down the fort. Really appreciate it. For everybody with the super chats and all the new members, really appreciate you being here. we are going to be back same time, same place next week. Don't forget, if you are interested in the Matten filters, we have that discount code from Flip Aquatics down in the description below, as well as a lot of other videos that will talk all about air-driven systems and comparing them and all kinds of stuff. So thank you once again for hanging out with us, and we will see you same time, same place, hopefully next week. Have a wonderful rest of the week, everybody. Bye-bye.